So, first, thank you for the invitation,
Thank you for coming.
to be with you. I have a challenge here, which is trying to explain in the most easiest way I can a lot of material, but I'm not going to go over the whole thing. I know that we have to be out of here by what? Five, right?
Five,
Yeah.
10 yeah, 5.
You can go to the bumper.
Okay, well,
10
it's
past
okay.
5.
So basically, I wanted to do a presentation about first, we're living moments. The moments we're living today are really, really. We're seeing like a civilizational crisis. That's what we're seeing, no? And that civilizational crisis manifests in many ways, And just the Palestinian experience that we're living is really devastating because if you look carefully, the Nazis were hiding their genocide. You cannot find like a document of the Nazis saying, we're going to exterminate the Jews, okay? But they were doing it, no? But of course, they were doing it, but it was a moment where they were not saying it in an overt way. And when historians go to try to find out documents, nobody finds a document because really they never put it in writing. They never said that in that way, although they did. They said a lot of anti-Semitic stuff in their rhetoric and very racist, rhetoric. But they never said we're going to, And there is a Jewish philosopher, Hannah Arendt, very well known. She was a disciple of Heidegger. And in the early 60s, Eichmann was captured and processed in Israel. Eichmann was a bureaucrat of the Nazis who was in charge of the extermination process, one of them, one of many of them. And when he, in this trial, she went there to report, to cover the trial more as a journalist rather than a philosopher, and she was sending reports to a magazine in New York, and this came out as a book called Eichmann and in Jerusalem. That's the title of that book. And there she says something. She said, this guy really is not, when you see him, is just like any other person, normal guy. He was just following orders. And then she started talking about the banality of evil, saying, this guy did not have any intention of doing anything. He just was a bureaucrat, and as a bureaucrat, he was doing his job, which is that he was following orders, and he was doing it in a banal way, without intending to do X or Y. Just, I have a job, they pay me, but I have to do this. There's nothing I can do. This is my job, this is this kind of thing. And so she started coining this term, banality of evil. Today, I don't think banality of evil makes any sense of what we're seeing, because everything is overt. They're now, so today we can talk about the transparency of evilness, or maybe the spectacle of evilness, because now they say, we want to do this. I mean, and you take politicians today also, like Donald Trump, or the guy who won the elections in Argentina 2 days ago, Milei. This is like a Trump kind of guy, where they're just telling you in your face the most evil things that they're going to do it. And they promise, I'm going to do this. And it's just crazy. So today they're not hiding or anything like that. It's like right out there in front of everybody to see. And so we're now, I would say, in a civilizational crisis, because not only because of the crisis that we're seeing in Palestine, or the politics of the world today, or conflicts, wars, all of that, but also because we also are in a ecological crisis. So we don't know, how long we're going to go with this ecological crisis, the destruction of planet Earth, the life in planet Earth. And we also have crises of state crisis. The form of state we have today is always bringing all kind of problems, because there is this pretension of one state, one nation, one identity, one people, and in reality that doesn't work, because everywhere you go, you have multiple cultures inside one state, and then the pretension of having just one identity and one everything is just problematic, because not everybody shares the same identity or the same history, whatever. Well, this form of political authority called the nation state is also in crisis. And we have crisis also of, the Palestinian things, like the epitome, okay? Epitomize but it is, in many ways, you could see this in many parts of the world, of racism, massacres of people because they are inferior beings or whatever, so this kind of thing happening everywhere too. So so I want to go into history just to look at a few things. We don't have time to go over all these issues, but I can point at some things that I think are important for us to keep in mind, and that has to do with the transition in history between Unitarian Christianity and Trinitarian Christianity, and the consequences of that transition for today. Okay, this is what I want to do. It would be kind of superficial, because I will have to, it would take a long time, maybe a several days seminar to really go over all this stuff. But just to give you a hint, when you look at Prophet Jesus, he was the term he used for the divine being was, someone knows the term he used? Huh? Allah, because Allah, Allah, okay, it's very close, because he was speaking what language? Aramean. You say in English what? Armenian? Aramaic language, and that was his language. So, and that was the language of the Jewish community at the time in Palestine. That was the language, and he will use the term Allah, and then he will the way, for example, he prayed. All of this is described in the Aramaic Bible. The Aramaic Bible was later translated to Greek, and then from Greek to Latin. Then what happened in this translation is that we're lost in translation, because what happened is that the Aramean is a Semitic language with a particular cosmology that is very different from Greek cosmology. So when you translate from Aramaic to Greek, what happens is that the Bible got colonized by Greek cosmology, and Greek cosmology is dualistic; it's not holistic. Okay, Aramaic language is very Semitic; it's very holistic in its cosmology. I will explain all these things later. But so the point is that this translation, without taking care of the cosmology, if you just translate like this in a mechanical way, you lose a lot of meanings, and you start distorting the meaning, because you're just translating mechanically from one language to another without taking care of the cosmological background of each language. Okay, so basically, we know, for example, Jesus. You ask Christian audiences today, how did Jesus pray? In the Aramean Bible, he goes to his knees and prostrate, to the ground. It's not like this, like the Christian church does. It's like, this is but it's really like Muslims do today. Okay, that was the way he prayed. And it's described in the Aramean Bible. All of this is lost in translation, and but anyway, because we went from Aramaic Bible to Greek Bible, from Greek to Latin, and then from Latin to all the other modern languages. Okay, so that's so it's a translation, and then what you're reading now is we're lost there. I can tell you that a lot of this knowledge about about the early period, with Jesus and the Aramaic Bible, I learned it from a scholar in Sevilla, University of Sevilla, Abdel Mumin Aya. Okay, Abdel Mumin Aya. Fortunately, we have a scholar who have done this work, and he has been working on this brother is he reverted to Islam, and then he's been doing work of translating directly from Aramaic to Spanish, respecting the cosmology of the Aramaic language, without passing through Greek or Latin or anything like this. Then when you read the Bible, the translation is just nothing to do with what we're reading, And then in the Aramaic Bible, Jesus is a prophet. Jesus is not the Son of God. Okay, another thing. Okay, so what is the concept of Allah? The concept of Allah is a cosmological concept. It's a cosmological concept because what it meant was, the divine, basically through this cosmological concept, is the understanding that the way I translate this to modern language is if I say God, it's problematic, because if we translate all these cosmological concepts like Allah, or Pachamama in the indigenous communities in Latin America, or Tawhid, or if we translate just like that, then the problem is that in the main audiences that we're dealing with are already colonized with Christendom. Because in our common sense, in Christendom, God is a white man, European white man, floating in a cloud, surveilling and punishing. This is the image we have in Christendom. So the idea we have is like a European old-age man, in a cloud that surveils and punish, and that have a cane, and if you misbehave, hit you with the head with a cane, and if you keep misbehaving, send you to hell. Okay, this is the idea. Okay, it's an idolatric, shirk concept, really. And this is so when you say God, and unfortunately, that also in our own tradition in the Ummah, you have people that still think of Allah in this way, as some man in a cloud, but this is part of years or centuries of colonization of Muslim lands, and other parts of the world too, where we kind of battle some concepts that do not belong to the tradition, that were imported to the tradition through colonialism, through the imposition of colonialism. Okay, and so what happened is that then you have the concept of Allah. I prefer to translate in a different way. I prefer to say instead of saying God, because immediately the image we have is this Christiandom image. I prefer to translate differently. I prefer to say Allah is a divine cosmic force that creates life with intelligence. That's the translation I prefer to use, so that I interrupt there the common sense that we have from Christendom. It doesn't matter you're Muslim or you're whatever. This is our common sense, because we're born and raised in a world where Christendom is still hegemonic, And so I prefer to use a long phrase like that to call attention to something that is not exactly the way we are understanding the idea of God, no? And saying this is a divine force create life with intelligence. That the creation, all the creation, everything we have around, even ourselves, is part of this force. We are created by that force. But at the same time, that there is a creation with intelligence. Because you look at the universe, anything from a microparticle to the astronomical structures, it's as if there was an engineer behind it, because everything is structured in such a way that it's just amazing. It's scientists get
Mind blown.
yeah, mind blowing every time they're looking at this thing. They say, "Wow, but this is like," because it's like if there was an engineer fabricating these structures. It's organized. It's beautiful, and so so that's what I'm saying. It's a divine force that creates life with intelligence. And now, what are the consequences of this? It had important consequences. One of them is that if you look at the prophetic tradition, in the prophetic tradition, all the prophets got in trouble with the powers that be. All of them. There's no exception. Every one of them got in trouble. Because with this concept, which is the concept of Tawhid, okay, difference within unity, no? And you could see this concept all over the world, not just in Islam. You could see it in other traditions, the same concept. When you look at indigenous people in South America, for example, they have the concept of Pachamama, Mother Nature. That's the way you could translate it. But they're talking about something similar, and they're not polytheistic the way Western anthropologists describe it. They're not really polytheistic. They have the concept of Tawhid there, of different within unity. It's there in the concept of Pachamama. And so so why the prophets enter in trouble every time they were, you have prophets? Because this concept basically is saying that there is you, Pharaoh, you say Pharaoh in English, right? Pharaoh, you emperor, you king, you are just sacred with the smallest, like everybody else, because we're all part of the creation. But you're not sacred with a capital S. That is, you're not someone sent by God to earth. You're just a terrestrial, earthly power structure. You're not really. So therefore, you're not perfect, and therefore you should be submitted to critique. Okay? And there you go, the troubles, no? Because the moment you start criticizing this powerful structure, then you enter in trouble because they don't like it, So they want to sacralize their power and their structure of power. They wanted to sacralize, make it sacred. But what happened? The prophets are always desacralizing these powers. They say, no, wait. You are a human being with small L like me and anybody else, but you're not like with a capital S, a sacred with capital S, okay? Because, that will be shirk, that will be idolatry, that will be taking Allah for a king or an emperor or a pharaoh, And so, they enter in trouble because of that. And then there was the concept of unity with indifference. That means that all forms of life to be able to reproduce and be produced and reproduce requires some kind of balance and harmony between different forms of life. Because if one form of life starts destroying other forms of life, you destroy life, as period. And you will see that in the past in history. in the period of the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were like eating up everybody, every other beings, etc. And so it was like the dynasty of dinosaurs, and the whole thing ended in a destruction of life in the planet. And there was a long period where you have destruction of life in planet Earth, and then you have the reemergence, etc. No, you could look at that moment of the history of the planet. But the point is that any species that begins to destroy the other species is just destroying life, because the condition positive of life is difference within unity. That is the coexistence of different forms of life in a balanced equilibrium, in an equilibrium, in a balanced way, where if you overdo something and you start destroying life around you, you will destroy yourself, you will destroy life. Okay, so this is common sense in a holistic cosmological understandings of the world. Okay, and you could see that not just in Islam, you could see this holistic concept in other cultures. Okay, so 4 centuries later, you have the reforms of Constantine. Constantine was emperor, okay? Because it's interesting, because Moses never said he was a Jew. Jesus Christ, or Jesus, never said he was Christian. You see what I'm trying to say? And the idea of Islam is an idea about that applies to all the traditions where you have this submission to the divine, where you submit to the divine, and that could happen in different traditions, not just in one. Okay, but what happened many times is that with these shirk structures, where you have political powers coming in to sacralize themselves, then the whole thing becomes problematic, because then you start confusing the idea of Allah or Pachamama or whatever with a particular structure or person or whatever, and then you fall into problems of shirk, idolatry, etc. And you start sacralizing beings that are not exactly sacred with a capital S, even though that's what they pretend to be, okay? And that could happen in many traditions, okay? Nobody can escape that completely or fully, because there's always this temptation of political power and structure to become sacred, and try to sacralize themselves. So what happened was Constantine in the 4th century, okay, Roman Empire, 4th century after, I say the Christian 4th century, okay. So you have at that period the followers of Allah, of the Aramaic language, Bible, the Bible in Aramaic language, start calling themselves Unitarian Christians. Start using this term, because at the moment Jesus was not founding a new thing called Christian. That happened like a century later, okay, where you have people organized along this idea. But that Unitarian Christian have the notion of unity with different. The Tawhid notion was there, okay. Here comes Constantine and have a challenge, and the challenge is the following: a lot of the Unitarian Christians start looking at the emperor and the Roman Empire in a critical way, because they start saying, hey, you guys, you emperor, you're just human being like anybody else. There is a force beyond you, that you're not exactly that force, and you don't represent it either. So if you're not perfect, so you could be submitted to critique. And then suddenly all this movement of Unitarian Christians start having conflict with empire, with the Roman Empire. And they were persecuted by the Roman Empire, by the way. So it got to a point that the Roman Empire was losing its sacredness, the emperor lost its sacredness in the eyes of the people with the Unitarian Christian concept of Allah, and the cosmology of unity or difference within unity, so immediately they start becoming desacralized in the eyes of the people. So the first thing that Constantine did was, okay, if you cannot beat them, join them. So he shifted the identity of the empire into Christian. Okay? And here comes the foundation of Christiandom. I make a difference between Christendom and Christianity. Christianity is a spirituality like any other one. But Christendom is when Christianity turns its spirituality into a power structure of domination, into a theology of domination. Okay? And so powerful structures, state structures, etc., they use this as a way to oppress people, etc., using a distorted version of Christianity, okay? So that's why I call Christendom, and I distinguish it from the spirituality. So what happened is then that the emperor start saying to people, hey, calm down, don't fight us, because I am Christian like you. But of course, he cannot just become Christian like you without shifting or changing the cosmology. Because the cosmology of Allah will still say you're not sacred with a capital S. So if the empire and the emperor, they wanted to resacralize the emperor and the empire, they have to shift and change the cosmology. They have to make a big shift here. Because if he became Christian but did not change the cosmology, then the attempt at resacralizing the empire was going to be a failure. Because if he said, the empire is now Christian, I'm Christian, don't fight me, don't criticize me, to the people, who were Unitarian Christians, they will still say, yes, okay, great, but then you have to admit that you're not then, sacred with capital S. You just want more, and therefore you're not perfect, and therefore you could be submitted to critique. But that was not the project. The project was to resacralize the empire. That's when they shift from Unitarian Christian to Trinitarian Christians. And that was in the year 324, 25, in the Council of Nicaea, where they basically took Trinitarian Christianity as the new cosmology of Christendom. And of course, the Trinitarian cosmology, what it brought to the attention, to the picture, was that, okay, the same way, so you have God, the Spirit, and the Son and the Spirit, no? The Trinity, okay? The Holy Spirit, and God have sent his Son to earth. Okay, so they turned Jesus the prophet into Jesus the Son of God. Okay, and then in the Bible they start shifting and changing the content of the Aramaic Bible, and bringing this idea that Jesus is Son of God. He's not just another prophet, like was said in the early Bible. So now what happened is that they're going to try to bring the following idea by analogy. If God brought his Son to earth, in the absence of the Son, then the emperor is now the representative of God on earth, by analogy. So they made this analogy using Trinitarian Christianity and saying, okay, the emperor is now the representative of God on earth in the absence of his Son, Jesus. And then start turning the emperor into a sacred being with a capital S. Okay, that's what Trinitarian Christianity brought in, but it brought other things, like, for example, dualism, a dualistic structure of knowledge, which means the following: nature belongs to Satan, to evilness. Okay, here are the divine beings, which is the emperor, the people who follow the emperor, and anybody who will be different or who criticized, they will be thrown to the side of nature and therefore evilness. Okay? And so, for example, you look at Christiandom patriarchy, they have always this notion of women being suspicious of evil forces. Okay? Always, that was always in the imaginary of Christiandom patriarchy. And always seeing women as some hybrid between human and nature. Okay? And that was there, the seed for what later came to be known as the witch hunt, no? Accusing women of being witches and burn them alive, no? Later, because they were evil, etc. But that's there from the beginning, and you have this split or dualism between the forces of nature and human forces. Okay. Now, all of this sounds like something abstract, theological, etc. But look at the consequences of this now. I'm going to now make a big jump here because we don't have time. What time is it?
It's for,
Exactly.
I was also thinking maybe we could do leave some time for some questions.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to make a big leap here because there's a lot of things to discuss, because then you have the emergence of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You have the Islamic tradition. You have the arrival of Muslims to the Iberian Peninsula, and Islam came to correct. I mean, prophets are always sent to correct problems. Okay, if you look at history, the prophetic tradition, prophets always come in moments of trouble, okay, and of confusion, and they come to bring light. Okay, and and so at that moment, with Christendom now taking over, especially in this part of the world, we know as Europe today. I'm saying today because in the past, this part of the world have different names, okay? But just to understand each other's. I always say there was, before the European colonial expansion in 1492, nobody called themselves Black or African in Africa. Nobody called themselves Indian in the Americas. Nobody called themselves white or European over here. I mean, these are modern identities, inventions of the modern world. This did not exist before, because these are in fact racist classification of the European colonial expansion after 1492. But anyway, a lot of these identities are, if we go to the past, they did not exist, okay? And partly because in most part of the world, there was no racism, okay? Racism is a modern thing. It's not something from the past. But anyway, so in this part of the world that we now call Europe, there was Christendom, okay? And the problem with this cosmology was that if you have this split, this dualism, then there were several problems created there. The first problem, they turned something that is unity with heterogeneity, okay, like Tawhid, no, with the concept of difference within unity, and turn it into unity with homogeneity, okay, with the Trinitarian Christianity. So there was a big shift there, okay. Well, now you have to be Christian or you are part of evil, with the dualism of Christendom, you see? So now you're part of evil if you're practicing something different, and then you're going to be persecuted. That's why you have in Europe all this persecution against Jews, against Muslims later, against all kinds of different traditions. They were persecuted. Even Unitarian Christians were massacred by the emperor. When they turned Christian, they turned Trinitarian. They massacred the Unitarian Christians, almost disappeared them, especially in this part of the world. The remainings of this tradition is mostly pockets of Christians in the Middle East. You could find some of them in Egypt, some of them in Syria, some of them. pockets of them who survive there and keep this tradition of Unitarian Christianity. Over here is like, that's over, okay? So, so what happened then is that we move into a world where first, you couldn't do science because if nature is already part of evil and you have someone experimenting with that, you are playing with evil forces. So they will crucify you in the Roman Empire. Later, with feudal Europe, they will burn you alive. Okay? So this is Europe fell into an obscurantist period where science and spirituality were opposed to each other. You could not be spiritual and do science. You could not do science and be spiritual. There was mutually exclusive, one from the other. Exclusive or mutually?
Exclusive. That was correct.
Yeah, exclusive one from the other, and then and that's why then you have a period of obscurantism that lasted hundreds of years, more than 1,000 years. Europe fell into a period of obscurantism. Okay, Islam came to this part of the world, especially Iberian Peninsula, some part of the south of Europe, some parts of Eastern Europe, and then you have here the reemergence of sciences, the reemergence of philosophy, everything that was persecuted by the other side. Okay, and for example, in Christiandom Europe, you could not study Aristotle or the Greeks. Okay, if they found you with a book of any of the Greek philosophers, they will burn you alive. You'll be evil. Only the top theologians of the church could have access to those books. Then you have a period where sciences flourish. Why? Because in Islamic civilization, because there is the notion of holistic notion of Tawhid. If you discover something, nature is not evil. Nature is part of the creation. It's part of the creation of life with intelligence, of this divine force, right? So if there's someone working or experimenting with nature and discovers something we didn't know, you're celebrated as a scientist. You're not burned alive. You're like, wow, you discovered something that is part of the creation of Allah that we didn't know about. So you're celebrated. You're not burned alive. That's a complete different understanding of the relationship between science and spirituality. You see, you could do science and do spirituality without being in contradiction. It was compatible because there's no dualism. It's a holistic concept. Christiandom brought the dualism and then separated the whole thing. And then someone working with nature, that's why they burn alive a lot of women, because a lot of women in this part of the world were indigenous from this land. I mean, and when I say indigenous today, because of the racist imagination, we imagine a dark-skinned woman, but in this part of the world, North Europe, etc., they were blonde hair, blue eyes. So when I say indigenous, it's not about a color, it's about a way of being, a way of living. It's about something else. So they had a different cosmology, and they transmitted knowledge orally from generation to generation, and women were the carriers of this knowledge in Europe. What happened? They burned them alive. They went after them because they have knowledge of medicine, knowledge of astronomy, knowledge of plants, knowledge of ethical knowledge, spiritual knowledge, and they have a holistic concept that were going against the grain of Christiandom at the time. Not Christianity, Christiandom, Trinitarian Christianity, you see? So they were also seen as evil because we were playing with evil forces. They had all this knowledge of nature, medicine, stuff, so they were accused of playing with evil forces and burned alive. We're not talking about a few hundred, we're talking about millions, okay, of women in this part of the world, okay? Burned alive, accused of being witches, okay? So, so the notion of having rights of people who has a different spirituality was not there in Christendom because they had the notion of unity with homogeneity. So you have to be Christian or then you're part of evil. There was no middle point there. You see? And that's when not only is an obscurantist period in terms of science, philosophy, all this stuff for this part of the world, but it's an obscurantist period also because they were persecuting minorities. They couldn't tolerate anyone who would be different because for them, it was the notion of unity with homogeneity. You see? This dualism of Trinitarian Christiandom. And then, so they broke away from the holistic concept of Unitarian Christians, moving into this dualistic notion that then brought all these problems. In terms of rights of women, for example, women have zero rights in Christendom at the time. Well, so you could see a contrast between Islamic civilization now here, okay, after the 7th century, you have here now a period where you have the flourishing of Islamic civilization here, science, philosophy, etc. And you could see a big contrast. While in the Christendom world, women have no right to divorce. Over here, there was a right to divorce. And we're talking about borders that were close to here, okay? Borders. You went to the other side, there was no right to divorce. You came to this side, there was a right to divorce. There was no right for women to inherit or to have property. Over here, there was a right of property, inheritance, all of that, okay? In Al-Andalus, no? Then you have the contrast. Over there, scientists were hiding or killed, okay? Over here, scientists were flourishing, okay? Technology, science, etc. I invite you to see the museum in Cordoba whenever you have a chance. That is the one that is in the Caraola, that is right behind the mosque in Cordoba. What's the name of that museum? It's right there in the medieval tower in the bridge behind the mosque. It's called Museo Andalucía or something like that. Huh? De la Calahorra. It's a tower. It's behind the mosque. It is a bridge. There is a river, the Guadalquivir River, and then you have the bridge. At the end of that bridge, you get to the door of the tower. That museum is really very interesting because it brings all these things, all the scientific developments during Al-Andalus, surgery, astronomical discoveries, navigating in deep sea, all the technology, all the instruments, well, a lot of stuff. They have the bisturi, what is called bisturi to do surgery. They have a lot of things that were developed here to do surgery. Well, it's very interesting museum, but these things in the other side were absent because of the obscurantism, persecution, etc. It was seen as a threat by Christendom. So, as I said, no science, no philosophy, no rights to minorities, no rights to women. So you go over the list, you start seeing a big contrast. Okay, so this is important to know so that when we talk about the conquest of Al-Andalus, we know what is being destroyed and what is replacing what is being destroyed. People talk about the conquest of Al-Andalus as something anecdotal. Oh, this happened. Okay, another conquest. No, it's not just another conquest. It was the first moment of the European colonial expansion. After Al-Andalus, the conquest of Al-Andalus, they rehearsed here a lot of the methods of conquest that they're going to rehearse, that are going to implement elsewhere. It began here, then they went to the Americas. But the methods that they developed here of conquest, I don't have time to go over all of that, they carry on into other parts of the world. So the first moment of European colonial expansion was here. One of the things, I'm only going to mention one of the things and then I stop. That is method of conquest is what today we call settler colonialism. You visited yesterday Pampaneira, Capileira. Okay. These were communities built by Muslims, and you know what happened? Ethnic cleansing. Sound familiar? Ethnic cleansing today, I think everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? Palestine. Ethnic cleansing began here.
Yeah.
They expelled by force, expelled the people who were living in those houses and brought Christians from the north to occupy these buildings, these houses. Okay? The people who were living here in Alpujarra and developed all these towns were the people who escaped from the conquest of Granada. They followed Granada. They came this way. And they lasted another, 80 years here. Okay? Until you have the wars of Alpujarras, and then they destroyed their power, the structure, etc. And a lot of them have to escape to Muslim lands, including Jews. And we have to say that because today with the Zionist narratives, they say so many fake news and lies in history, but in fact, Jews were escaping to Muslim lands because they were protected there. They were escaping from Christiandom Europe. Okay? And so a lot of the methods of conquest were rehearsed here and taken elsewhere. Okay? And what we call modernity is the secularization of Christiandom cosmology. Okay? Just to give you one example, and I promise I finish this time. Just to give you one example. The Christiandom dualism I explained to you between human and nature, okay, nature is evil, is secularized by Descartes, René Descartes, the modern philosopher, European philosopher in the 16th century, in the 17th century. He begins to talk about the dualism between humans and nature. He's going to take away the theology, but he's going to say nature is savage, nature is a force we need to control and conquer, and you could see that in Bacon too, Francis Bacon. You could see that in Descartes. It's a secularization of Christian cosmology.
Yeah.
So they're thinking from Christian cosmology, but what they do then is that they take the language of theology to say the same thing. Okay? So this is just an example of how the modern world we live, this disaster we call modernity, that is destroying life, is really founded on these reforms that I mentioned to you of Constantine in the 4th century, and it's still carrying on to the present, but now disguised as non-theological, as secular, scientific, progress, civilization, etc. But if you examine carefully, it's just the secularization of all the narrative of Christian cosmology. I just gave you one example, but I can give you 15 examples, but there's no time. Let's open for conversation. Thank you.
We have time.
Yeah, okay.
So I guess not so much about the topic, but about you. I want to know what kind of inspired your journey into academia, or what initially sparked your desire to want to learn this stuff in the first place.
Well, first, these things, many times you don't decide them. They just,
Present themselves.
huh?
Present themselves.
As a Sufi, I can tell you these things come to you. You don't go to them. They just come to you. They just, so to give you just one anecdote, I went to Granada to teach some courses there, but while I was walking through Granada and learning about Granada, then I start connecting, because I come from the island of Puerto Rico. It's a colony of the US in the Caribbean. Okay, I come from there. I come from a Latin American culture. Okay, so I know a lot about Latin America, North America, that kind of thing. When I came here, then I discovered these other things, and then I start connecting the dots. You know, because a lot of things that over there seems as an innovation of the colonialism that arrived there in 1492, after 1492, in fact, they were already rehearsed here before 1492 in the conquest of Al-Andalus.
Yeah.
You see? So I start putting the dots together this way, you know, because I went to Granada, visit Granada over every year annually. I have a course called Critical Muslim Studies that we discuss all this stuff in depth with scholars, not just me, other scholars too. I organize this in June every year. And and so coming here, I start putting the dots together. You know, I don't know if the article I sent was shared, but the article, although it doesn't go in depth into the things I said today, but you could see there how I put the dots together.
So which article?
I'll share it.
Okay, great.
I'll share it in the group. Yeah.
About what?
That I'll share it in the group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So these are things that I don't think that you decide. You know, these things are come to you in a way, unexpected way. Alhamdulillah.
Do you so I don't know your background, but I'm assuming you've been here for a while learning about this and teaching about this. So the community here, do they understand the gravity of their own history? Do they understand
Well, what
has happened, the way that you just explained it?
no. Listen, the Christians here still celebrate the 2nd of January, the fall of Granada, as a holiday.
Yeah.
Oh,
Up
okay.
until recently, they would even put out ham and wine outside their doorsteps on the 2nd of January in Granada.
Yeah.
For
Like,
spirits.
No, as in what Muslims don't eat.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was
The
some sort
spirit.
of offering.
Yeah.
I thought it was some sort of offering to the spirits.
No.
Like Halloween. Oh, okay.
And they will here celebrate January 2nd, 1492 as a holiday, and they will rehearse the battles between Moors and Christians as some kind of festivity.
Yeah.
You know, Not only that. Remember I said that there were methods of conquest that were already practiced here that then were taken elsewhere? One of I mentioned to you, I didn't go in detail about that, but one of them, because there are many methods that the settler colonialism I mentioned, but the other thing they did here that brought elsewhere was the burning of libraries. They burned the libraries here. They burned the libraries. And then they did the same thing with indigenous people in the Americas. They burned
Burning of what?
the libraries. They burned the libraries. And so they burned the libraries, for example, of Granada. The Library of Granada have more than 250,000 books. More than 250,000 books. You know what was the largest library in Christendom Europe? It didn't have 1,000 books. The largest one, okay? And they were private libraries. Only the theologians of the church could have access to the book. No, it was not open to the public. Here they have public libraries. And they burned them. The Library of Cordoba have 500,000 books.
Yeah.
That tells you something about the contrast in the relation of these civilizations to knowledge. Okay? So the Library of Granada was burned by Cardinal Cisneros, this cardinal of the church. I believe it was 1502, 10 years or 8 years after, or 1490, something like that. A few years after the conquest, 1492. Look, they conquered Granada. The fall of Granada, the last remaining stronghold of Al-Andalus, was January 2nd, 1492. That was the end of Islamic civilization here. January 11, 1492, Columbus met with the king and the queen in Alhambra, where you're going tomorrow, right? And then there he got the authorization of the queen to go to the Americas and the gold for the expenses. And then he went there as a continuation of the expansion, And then he brought all the methods of conquest they learned here, conquering Muslim and Jews. It was mostly Muslim and Jews here. They brought them to America. So one of them was settler colonialism that I already discussed to you, but also the burning of libraries. They went there and burned the libraries. That, I call that epistemicide. Genocide, epistemicide. Destruction of knowledge, of the knowledge of this other civilization. What happened? You burn the libraries, you force conversion on the people. After 3 generations, the new generation, three generations later, they have no memory and no source to contrast the hegemonic narrative, colonial narrative, okay, from the tradition or the narrative of their ancestors. And so now you have a colonial mentality. But now you're barring all the fake news. that they're going to put in your head.
Yeah.
You see? And now you don't have any source because they burned the libraries.
Yeah.
And then they also Castilianized, not only Christianized, but Castilianized. They took they prohibit the Arabic language and all that stuff, you know. So now the access to knowledge is gone for the descendants of the Moors and Jews. Okay, and now what you have is what they tell you. You don't have any way to contrast. Okay, now this method they use in the Americas with indigenous people. The same thing. They burn the quipus and the codices. These are the forms of writing they have and the archives they have of their knowledge. And let me tell you, these civilizations in America were way ahead the Europeans at the time. Okay, that's something I have to say. I cannot now dedicate time for that, but just bear with me. These people were way advanced in terms of material civilization. Okay, to the point that Hernan Cortez, when he arrived to Mexico, he was astonished because there was a city of 500,000 people, okay, with no peste, ¿cómo se dice la peste?
No
Disease, how do you say that? It's a word for that. But anyway, there was no, people are not dying of diseases, etc. You know,
They live for longer.
No, because what I mean is that the sanitation of the city, 500,000 people. Here, the largest city has 60,000 people. And they were all dying of,
I understand.
how do you say this word in English? Peste.
Yeah, plagues.
Plagues. They were dying of plagues here with 60,000 people in the city. Over there, the Aztecs have 500,000, a city of 500,000 people without plagues. Okay? And because they have a system of water, sewage, etc., like here too. Here, Cordoba was a city of 1 million people. Cordoba. It was the largest city in the world after Beijing at the time. It was Cordoba. And they didn't have plagues, while the rest of Europe were dying of plagues with cities of 2,000 people or 20,000.
Why was that? Was that because they just...
Because they didn't have the sewage water
they have the
system.
knowledge of setting up this infrastructure.
They would wash their hair, they would just put on wigs.
Oh, Gandalo. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Gandalo,
Yes.
okay.
Listen,
You
the
have a word for this. Yeah.
sewage water system,
Yeah.
the sewage water system of Al-Andalus was way advanced compared to anything in Europe at the time. So even the kings and the monarchy, they have to do their necessities outside the castle until the 18th century, 19th century.
Wow.
You know that?
Yeah, well, the
King and queens
French
had to
did a
go
big-
outside the castles because they didn't have a system for sewage and water and that kind of thing. You see? And so that's why there were all these plagues, all these problems, you know? But anyway, I'm saying this because, so indigenous civilizations have way advanced, you know, in terms of, because we have this idea that these people were primitive, backward,
Yes.
all of that, because this is a Eurocentric narrative. The problem in their case, see, listen to this one. In Islamic civilization, they burned the libraries here, but because Islamic civilization went from East Africa or West Africa all the way to, you know, Middle East, South Asia, east of China, Indonesia, all the way to the Philippines, there were many libraries.
Yeah.
So you could burn books here that will be over there. So you could contrast the hegemonic fake news and narratives by getting the books elsewhere, you see? But in indigenous civilizations, they have libraries, all of that, but they didn't have
Right.
elsewhere where to go to find the books that they burn here. You see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Because they have a huge territory, Mexico and part of Central America, it's a huge territory, but once they burn that, that's it. There's no other place to go where you can find the books they burn. So you couldn't contrast their fake news with the reality of what was going on, you know? And that's why a lot of the racist stereotypes we have about indigenous civilization keep going into the present, because we don't have ways to contrast
Right.
anything, you know. Even though scientifically speaking, they were way more advanced than what Europe at the time. That's something we need to say. For example, the most precise calendar in the world was the Maya calendar. The most precise in 1492. Okay, how did they get to that knowledge? We don't know because they burned the
There's
archives.
no paper trail.
Yeah. Anyway,
I have a question. So, because we're seeing a repeat of history in some form or the other now, what kind of hope do we have as a Muslim community, do you think, in your opinion, in getting the right knowledge out there to understand? Because this is something that we've been suffering for some time, where our own people, I'm talking about Muslims here, we lack, let me switch it, is there an opportunity now with things happening where we can help our own communities understand and educate better, because stuff is quite crucial.
okay, here comes the challenge. A lot of what we know today as Islamic spirituality has been tainted by the colonizers. I'll give you examples, several examples. For example, I'll give you an anecdote. I went to Morocco, and most of you who have gone to Morocco have seen this. And outside the mosque, it says non-Muslims cannot enter the mosque. Okay? So I was like, what? It says in French and in English.
Okay.
So that the tourists know you cannot enter there. No person who is non-Muslim cannot enter. Okay? That's a rule there. So I was like shocked because I haven't seen this anywhere, even from the times of the Prophet, peace be with him. You know, it was open for everybody. All the tradition, the mosque was always an open space. It was never something like this, a rule like this. So I started searching, and then I started talking to people there, and they will recite for me false hadiths.
Wow.
Like, wow, so justifying this with false, no, this is authentic Islam, this is la 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 la, okay? So I was like, wow, where is this coming from?
Yeah.
I started searching, and guess what? I found out that, do you know where is this coming from? This is coming from General Lyotet. Who is General Lyotet? He was the French general of the army of the French occupation of Morocco during colonial times. In the early 20th century, we're not talking 19th century, it was early, 100 years ago. He passed a decree forbidding non-Muslims from entering the mosque. Why? Because he was afraid that inside the mosque there will be
They'll see the beauty.
there will be the subversion against French colonialism. And so he starts segregating the communities of different faith. And so he passed a decree. It's called the Lyotet Code, okay? A law passed where non-Muslims cannot enter mosque, okay? Now, at the beginning, it was an imposition. People protested. Later, it became like a habit.
Yes.
Then a few decades later, then it's a custom.
Yeah.
And then 60, 70 years there, it's now authentic Islam. And now, 100 years later, listen, 100 years later, now is justified with hadiths. And now it's like, and nobody remembers Lyotet, and nobody knows that this is an it's a borrowing from a French general dictating what is Islam. Okay? Now, take this as a metaphor of what happened with many of our traditions. Not just Muslim, it happened also with indigenous tradition in America, it happened with Buddhists, it happened with all the traditions. The colonizers always twisted the theology and cosmology in such a way that now we have versions of colonial Islam.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Now, so what is the challenge now? That we need to not only decolonize the history and the power structures that were imposed, but we need to decolonize ourselves and our own tradition and look inside and say, okay, wait a minute. I mean, what are we saying here? What are we repeating here? Where is this coming from? Look at jurisprudence, for example. This question, in India, for example. and this happened not only everywhere in the Muslim world, they twisted the Islamic jurisprudence. And now Islamic jurisprudence is just family codes. All the other aspects of Islamic jurisprudence is gone. Now everything is about family codes. What about Islamic jurisprudence in relation to the economy, in relation to riba, in relation to many other issues? It's gone. Because, of course, the powers that be don't like that. They don't like that for Islamic jurisprudence to have anything to say about anything, including family law is still distorted. It's still not exactly the way it was. So then what happened? You have in India today a Hindu nationalist, fundamentalist, persecuting Muslims, trying to destroy whatever was left there, the family code. And now Muslims hold into that family code because the only last remaining thing that you have. When in fact that Islamic family code is already problematic.
Yes.
And not to talk about the fact that they just eliminated a long time ago, not just the Hindi nationalists, but way back during British colonialism, they eliminated all this stuff. Okay? All the parts of jurisprudence that have to do with politics, economy, women's rights, all kinds of stuff. Okay? It's gone. So we need to do a lot of work to decolonize our minds and to decolonize our own traditions. And that's a challenge because it's easier to identify the colonizers out there and what they did. It's more difficult to look inside about everything they mess up. They mess up our theologies, our cosmology, and now it's more difficult to identify, okay, what of what I'm doing or thinking is really coming from the colonizer and not from the tradition. So we need to do work around that to decolonize the tradition too. And that's a challenge.
In Egypt, when we were in Cairo recently, we went to one of the mosques, Sultan Hassan, and it was interesting. I don't know if that's colonial or not, or maybe it's just a way to make money. If you went to the masjid, if you were Arab, you could enter and pray. If you were Muslim from any non-Arab country, you had to pay to pray.
No, but
Oh my God.
no, but that's the thing. Like we went to India with my family, and we were visiting like one of the oldest mosques. And from where I come from, you have access to the mosque, whether you're a woman, whether you're a child, whether you're male.
Over there.
And when we entered the mosque, we had somebody chase us out, and we were not. We had a
As
hijab
women.
on,
As women.
and he said, "Women has no right in the mosque." And we were just standing there. Like, I'm sorry, what? But we're here to pray. It's like, no, you can go pray somewhere else, but not in a mosque. And for me, it was mind-boggling because you're at a mosque
Yes.
to pray.
Yes.
It was time for prayer. We were there at the mosque to pray, and we were told by somebody that it's not.
Again.
You're not supposed to be there.
Again, these things, if you look back in history, a lot of these things are coming from the colonizers' mess up of our tradition. I'll tell you, I'll give you another example of this, which is that I gave you the one in Morocco, no? But you also have transformations in the practices itself, okay? For example, I mentioned the law, the code of law, no, as another example, how they twisted this. And the problem is that then we have this impression that this is there forever. And there's something wrong about the Indians, okay? The British were experts and the French in entering into another culture and twisting the whole thing. For example, I'll give you another example. You know the Islamic reformist tradition, Mohammed Abdul, Rashid Reda, Afghani, all these people, okay? Mohammed Abdul was writing fatwas for the British governor, Cromwell, in Egypt. It was Cromwell who said, I want a fatwa against riba. You write it. Things like this. It will mess up the theology. You see, because and then if you look at the memories of Cromwell, he wrote his memories before dying. He praised Mohammed Abdul. Because Muhammad Abu, this famous Islamic reformist that we praise and we think that he was a great guy. No, the guy was a British agent.
Yes,
Al-Afghani, another British agent. He had a debate in the 19th century against with Renan. And he asked, please do not translate what I said here to Arabic. Because everything he said was, he asked and plead the people in France not to translate what he said there with Renan into Arabic. Okay? Because he was basically giving up like a super Eurocentric, Christian-centric view. And this guy, Al-Afghani, was another British agent. Okay, I'm saying this because a lot of what passes today as authentic Islam, we need to take a second look at these things because there is a major transformation in the theology and cosmology, and this is the challenge we have today. As coming back to your question, we need to now not only do a decolonial critique of the modern world we are, but also to ourselves and our own tradition because it's messed up with all these colonial borrowings. Or impositions.
Can you be more specific, if you don't mind? What can we do to start to decolonize our minds and our hearts and souls? Like practical things we can walk away out of this building today and start doing.
Well, I think we need to reread history. Okay, we need to read the history that have been the narrative history that we have inherited from the hegemonic. Powers, in this case Western imperial powers, we need to take a second look at that because they're writing a history according to their own image and interest. So it's very problematic, their history. So there are people today doing critiques of these historical narratives. So I would say we need to have a critical view of these historical narratives. There is a book by the father of Ali Keeler.
Oh yeah.
It's a book that just came out recently.
There's also an interview with him.
This one. Thank you. Rethinking Islam and the West, a new narrative of the age of crisis.
Yeah, ask me to take a picture, maybe.
Yeah, let's pass it
Take a picture and pass it on. This book I recommend. It's a very good book because it shows you the problems with the civilization of modernity. We are in a modernity as a civilization of death. Not as an emancipatory.
Those who live in London is going to be a conference end of November.
What conference is that?
About this,
About him and his book
And also
in London.
It's going
if
to
you
be
look on blogging theology, it's
Oh, he's a great. I like his.
and he on blogging theology, there's an interview with him, with this English guy who's
Oh, yeah.
a convert.
Blogging theology. This
His YouTube channel.
YouTube channel in London. I mean, this guy is from London.
I'm gonna send it to the group. Blogging theology.
Blogging theology.
Great.
Send a link of the interview about this book with this author.
Okay, same.
I'm saying the father of Ali Keeler because his son lives here and he's a musician and he does Sufi music. He has a group called Firdaus and does a lot of concerts. He lives in this area. He's constantly here in Orgiva. He lives in Granada, but he's almost every weekend here in Orgiva.
He's going to be there also in London. He's going to start with reading Surat Al-Rahman, which is about the Mizan. And then his father and the rest of it's an academic group from Cambridge University that will do. I attended the one in Bedford, that was a similar one in June. They did that at Bedford. It's very instructive. It's the multimedia presentation, so it's very easy to follow.
My main
the book is
my main advice is everything you hear in the media, take it with skepticism, okay?
Pinch of salt, yeah.
And then search on your own for alternative sources of the narrative we're hearing. Okay, that's one thing. But another is the same methodology when we're talking about history or other topics. We need to take a second look because there's so many I call it fake news.
Yeah.
Fake news, not only in the fake news of the media. I'm talking fake news in historical narratives over centuries. So the fake news is not an invention now. It's fake news have been there for centuries. Yeah. You see, telling us all kind of lies about all kind of issues, And so this is something we need to decolonize from all this fake news.
Is there like a model somewhere?
For example, I still hear Muslims talking about the Islam, the Arab Muslim invasion of Spain.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
there was no Arab Muslim invasion of Spain.
Exactly.
That's another fake news, okay, of the narrative of Eurocentric but Spanish narrative of history, the reconquest, they call it, the reconquest. And I always say to the Spaniards here, until you decolonize the RE, you're not going to never understand anything. Because it's like if the conquest that you did, destroying Al-Andalus, killing people, genocide, that was ethnic cleansing here in the what I'm talking about, the conquest of Al-Andalus. For example, what happened in Capileira, Pampaneira, all these towns is ethnic cleansing. You see, it's what is you see today in TV in Palestine.
Yeah.
So these methods of conquest began way back. You see, and this narrative is called reconquest. Why is it called reconquest? Because we're recovering. There was a conquest. That's the fake news. No, there was an Arab Muslim conquest of Spain in the 8th century. If you begin from that narrative, then of course you are reconquering, you're recovering what was taken away from you. And then you're justifying the genocide, you see?
Yes.
Like the Israelis are doing today. So the thing is that that narrative is very problematic. There was a conquest, not a reconquest. It was a conquest. And what happened here was not an Arab Muslim conquest. For several reasons, that could take me out. I will just say 2 minutes. First, Spain did not exist in the 8th century. It was the Visigoth Empire. So if there was a conquest, it was not against Spain, because Spain did not exist in the 8th century. Even though Spanish historians keep saying that there was Spain here. Okay? It was the Visigoth Empire, together with the bishops of the church, of the Roman church. Then the second thing is that people here were oppressed by the Visigoth Empire, and they went to Morocco, what we call Morocco today, okay, and asked for Muslim solidarity, help. And there were Jews who went there asking for help for the situation, to help us out, because these people they were putting very high taxation system. And so the people here, they were Unitarian Christian Jews, and Iberian people, were indigenous people from here. Okay, so they asked for help over there. The Muslims sent. There is a debate about how many, but some people say 6,000, some people say 10,000, and some people say 15,000. Nobody says more than 15. Nobody says less than 6,000. Okay, is that an invasion? Wait a minute. The Visigoth army have more than 200,000 people. You cannot tell me that at the highest number, 15,000 soldiers sent from there, beat up an army of more than 200,000 people in 3 years. That is without motor vehicle, without airplane, without modern weapons, without nothing like this. In 3 years, they beat up the whole Visigoth Empire. So what happened? 10,000, 15,000 soldiers beat up an army of more than 200,000. Something happened here you're not telling us. And what happened is very simple. It was a war of liberation. There is a lot of the people here joined the Muslims, and everybody together went after the Visigoths. That's what happened. It was thousands and thousands and thousands of people joining the struggle to beat up, to destroy the Visigoth Empire. That's what happened. There's nothing else. I mean, and of course, the so-called reconquest took 800 years, but that was a real conquest.
Yeah.
That's why it took 100 years.
Yeah.
But these others was a war of liberation. They kick out the Visigoths, and it was Unitarian Christian. What happened at that time? Identities were more fluid than today.
Yeah.
So Unitarian Christian, they prayed similar to the Muslim. They thought Jesus is the prophet. They believe in the notion of Tawhid. Allah, all this stuff. So for them it was like, so there was mass conversion here.
Yeah.
I'm saying mass conversion to put a name, but really, I won't call it even conversion. They were just continuing with what they were doing. You see, and they didn't see any difference between Islam and what they were doing. So you see what I mean? And that's when you have all these Unitarian Christians joining Islam without any problem, and then you have the period called in Al-Andalus and until today of conviviality or coexistence between all these different faiths in a peaceful way, Christian, Jews, and Muslim under Islamic rule here. Okay, and that's why Al-Andalus became like an example of possibilities of coexistence and conviviality, because Muslims recognize people of the book, Jews have rights, Christians have rights. There was no, you see what I mean? And there was no pogroms or massacres against, like it happened in the Christian side, against Jews or Muslims, etc. So, so we're living in a post-Andalusian world.
Yeah, that's a line.
We're living in the post-Andalusian world. That is, what was destroyed here was replaced by the Christiandom, and then they took this global. Okay? And that's why the history of the conquest of Al-Andalus is so important.
Yeah.
Because that gives us a lot of knowledge about what they did elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because a lot of things were rehearsed here.
Yeah.
The burning of libraries. The encomienda is settler colonialism. Latin Americans like me, we used to think that this began with the conquest of Latin America after 1492. But when I came here, I saw that no, it began here.
Yeah.
It had even the same name, La Encomienda.
Yeah.
Here, they use La Encomienda. It's a method of conquest
Yeah.
where the encomendero is a Christian brought from the north that is going to take over the land, put the Moors and the Jews to work for him certain number of hours a day for free. Okay? For free. They don't pay them any salary, nothing. By force. It's a form of coerced labor. And then he will surveil their conversion to Christianity. So he will, on the one hand, surveil the exploitation of the labor. On the other hand, the encomendero is in charge of surveilling that they're not faking conversion. That's why pork industry in Alpujarra is so huge.
Yeah. The pork industry.
The pork industry in Alpujarra, in this area, so huge because a lot of Moriscos to survive and to say, yes, I converted, have to start selling pork, create, and eating pork. And there was on Friday, they have the pork feast. So there was a street, they closed the street, they put everybody they put pork there, and they start surveilling who eats and who doesn't eat.
Wow.
To see if you converted or not, if you're faking conversion.
Wow, that's evil.
So for those of you who are academics, Michel Foucault, of biopolitics did not begin in the 19th century in France. It began here in the conquest of Al-Andalus in the 15th century.
I have
Okay?
a question.
But anyway, that's a long one.
I have a question. Sort of knowing about or knowing through guesswork in Puerto Rico, for instance, where the narrative has forever been that Taínos were all killed, that there was no one that survived, the indigenous people within 100 years of Spanish arriving, that it was just, and now with DNA tests, the average Puerto Rican has between 15 to 20% indigenous blood, and you see it. I mean, you see it very much. In my family, you see it very much. You see, like, okay, those are very clear indigenous roots. But all of the DNA passes through the matrilineal line. So only through mother's lines, which indicates that there was a massive genocide of men. Do you know if that was also practiced here?
You mean here?
Yeah.
Like,
Because for sure people didn't all leave here. I know that they separated families. I know that they took children from Morisco families and they sent them to other regions in Spain and they had them living with Christian families to completely separate any sort of lines of tradition being maintained.
That
passed
happened
down.
here, but
But because the DNA, and it's the same in the Canary Islands as well. Now they're doing DNA testing in the Canary Islands, and different islands also indicate different percentages of indigenous Berber Amazigh blood in the Canary Islands. But again, there's complete cultural amnesia. People don't know who they are. But it's also only through the matrilineal lines. All of this DNA is only through the mother's lines, which indicates genocide of men.
yes,
So I don't
yes.
know. I don't know if you know anything about that, or if you know
Yeah,
if it was
definitely. This happened.
practiced like that
It was practiced
here.
here, but here something else happened
Mhm.
that did not happen there, which is that a lot of the Muslims, I mean in the Caribbean, because in the other parts of Latin America it happened like here. A lot of the Muslim and Jews that converted, there's thousands and thousands who stay here,
Yeah.
who did not go.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
stay here.
Yeah.
And there's evidence of people practicing Islam until the 18th century in hiding. People who continue, for example, here and the silk industry.
Yeah.
Here
I was saying
in
yesterday when I was putting out the mulberry trees on the walk.
in Pampaneira, there was all these were Muslims,
Yeah.
descendants of Muslims,
Yeah.
you know, and they were some of them were practicing Islam in hiding,
Yeah.
you know. But so a lot of them stay here. So there is a lot of people here that are direct descendants
Completely.
of
Yeah.
the Muslims,
Absolutely.
but they don't know it.
They
They don't
don't
have no
know.
memory, no.
That's why I find Spanish colonization
And they
to
think
be
that,
particularly brutal.
but when you look at
because-
them physically, and
Yeah.
they look like
Yeah.
any North African.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people in Andalusia. But it's not just Andalusia. You know that in DNA test, the highest percentage of Arab blood was found not in Andalusia, in Galicia.
No way.
In Galicia. But you know why? Because a lot of them Muslims from here run away over there through to the church networks
Right.
and went to live there.
Right.
You see, escaping the massacres here. Because over there was a Christian kingdom, etc., and there was
Right.
no conquest the way it was here.
Right.
You see, so a lot of them went there. And so the Gallegos have a lot of
Interesting.
Arab blood, you know,
Wow.
in their DNA test. The
Uh-huh.
Gallegos, you know, the Galician.
So I had this question at the beginning, and I think you have partly answered it, like through the rest of your talk. So you have the Christian like dualism between nature and knowledge of nature and all these things versus spirituality and theology. Then that slowly changes over time in history with like the Enlightenment and the Renaissance and all these sort of like movements towards knowledge of the but that was a very slow process and it took thousands of years, like you said. On the flip side, you had the Muslim world who were like leaders in terms of science and philosophy and technology and all of these different things.
What happened?
So yeah,
The
what
Muslim
happened?
world, what?
Like the Muslim world was relatively to Europe, it was much more advanced in terms of technology and science and
Not just Muslim world, China, India,
Okay.
Aztecs, the Incas in America.
Yeah.
Everybody was more advanced than the
But-
Europeans.
what-
It's a reality.
What I wanted to ask is like if you look at the world kind of today, and like I think you did answer part of this with colonialism and all that. The Muslim nations in general are seen as the most backwards and like the least technologically advanced. So
Okay.
how do you think that happened?
Okay, I'll give you another anecdote for Moroccans here. This university, the first university in the world, was created in Fez.
Yeah.
What's the name?
Qarawin.
Arawin. Arawin, what's the name?
Qarawin.
Karawin. This university was founded by a woman, 9th century. Okay, that was the first university in the world. Okay, now that university have physics, biology, astronomy, you name it. You know, Islamic science. They have everything there. The French came, colonized Morocco, and then what did they do? They turned this university into a theologian university and took out all the sciences. Okay, and then the colonialism of the European, they destroyed the infrastructure of knowledge production of the Islamic civilization.
Yeah.
They destroyed Islamic civilization. Peter, they destroyed the civilizations in the Americas.
Yeah.
Wherever the European colonial expansion keep this in mind, please, for your question, was a destruction, a systematic destruction of civilization. Everywhere they went, they destroyed whatever they found and imposed Christiandom, modern civilization, everywhere they went. Okay? So they destroyed whatever they found there. They destroyed the Mayas, they destroyed the Incas, they destroyed the Chinese, they destroyed all the civilizations in Canada, they destroyed them all. Okay? And imposed their own everywhere they went. So here, when they destroyed the Islamic civilization, they shifted or transformed the structures of knowledge.
Yeah.
So, for example, a university like this one that was a pioneer of universities worldwide, where kings from Europe went to study there. Did you know that? Kings from Europe were sent there to study in Morocco because that was the most advanced in science and all kinds of stuff. The French turned it into just theology and this colonial theology because they start messing up the theology.
Yeah.
And then what do you have today on this university? So first, the process was the following. They borrow the knowledge from Islamic civilization. I call that epistemic extractivism. You know, transnational corporations have extractivist industries with oil, with gold, silver, whatever, okay? I use this term to think about extractivism of knowledge. So they practice, because Europe was in an obscurantist period, when they start expanding to the world, they needed knowledge, okay, to keep their colonial expansion. So they they stole knowledge from Islamic civilization. Why Islamic civilization? They have it at the borders.
Yeah.
If Europe would have had China in the border, it would have done that with the Chinese. But they did it with Muslims. They were like this. Muslims were here, right here, in this territory. You know, this part of the world during Al-Andalus was not Europe. This was part of Africa. And the Mediterranean was a river, it was not a sea. And there was no border there. It was a fluid process of back and forth, you know. Then with the conquest of Granada, then it became a border, okay? And then, so they took the knowledge through epistemic extractivism from the Muslims. They rewrote history, because then if you look at history of science, it's a white supremacy discipline, where they are telling you all kind of lies. Copernicus, just to give you one example, but we can go on and on about this one. They always put a white man as the origin of all these knowledges.
Yes.
And for example, Copernicus took the knowledge from the Damascus Astronomy School that 300 years before him have made the demonstration that the earth goes around the sun.
Yeah.
And not only mathematical demonstration, but also diagrams showing this. In the plagiarism, Copernicus have mathematical mistakes that are not in the originals. Okay?
They're good at what they say.
Yeah, and they're not in, I mean, we can go on. I don't want to take much time, but they first stole the knowledge. Then the next thing they did was then to colonize Islamic civilization. That means destroy the civilization, the knowledge infrastructure, and then impose colonial Western-centric forms of domination there. And in the early period, they destroyed, for example, Algeria, in 1830, the French arrived in 1830 to Algeria. The Algerian population were 95%, something like that, literate in Arabic. When the French left in 1961, or were kicked out, the illiteracy in any language of Algerian was like 75%. So colonialism comes and destroy everything, destroy the education, and then you come 200 years later, and then you say, oh, what happened to these people? Are backward. Oh, they don't know anything about science. Oh, I mean, I'm sorry. You stole the knowledge, you make a claim, a false claim, like this is knowledge from white Europeans, And then you come, and then you colonize the land, you destroy the civilization, you destroy the knowledge infrastructure, and then 300-400 years later, you come say, oh, look, these people are backward. Oh, these people are not scientific. Oh, these people are, you see? I mean, it's just like, wait a minute. So we need to decolonize this narrative of history.
I like to read the history, but I have a little bit other vision in the way that these things happen. I think we have to look ourselves more criticized, because if these things happen, it's like a devil, no? But why they won? Because if you are in this land, if you are in a good way, it's impossible that they win you. They won you.
Why they won for the following reason, I explained that to you. There was this debate between a theologian of liberation, Enrique Dussel, who just passed away a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 89 years old, Christian theologian of liberation. He followed the prophetic tradition and all of that. Well, and there was this very interesting debate because I organized that at Berkeley. I invited Tariq Ramadan. I invited, as a theologian of liberation from Islam, and I invited Tariq Ramadan. I invited Dussel. That was 20-something years ago. And it was very interesting because Tariq Ramadan, following the reformist tradition, no, there's something wrong with us. We need to do something about, reforming Islam. And all this stuff. Okay, there's something wrong. We're doing something wrong. He came with this narrative like, okay, we need to look at our belly button, there's something wrong, what happened, And here comes a Christian theologian of liberation. It's not Muslim, but knows very well the Muslim tradition and tells him, why are you ashamed of being Muslim? There's nothing wrong to being Muslim. Because the problem with a lot of the intellectuals of Muslim tradition that ends up thinking that the solution is doing what the Christians did, a reform, no? A reform. The problem with that is that you guys are losing sight of the following. When you're in this shore, in the other shore of the Mediterranean, ¿me estás entendiendo? See, when you're in the other side of the shore of the Mediterranean, and you look at Europe, okay, suddenly you're looking at Europe like, wow, these people are becoming rich, wealthy. Wow, they're now, super developed in science, technology. And so you get enchanted with modernity. Because you think that what you're seeing there is something special about Western civilization, etc., that led them there. But you know what's happening with you guys? That you're blind towards the Atlantic. If you are looking from this shore of the Mediterranean over there without seeing the Atlantic, then you're going to fetishize the rise of Europe. Because what you're going to miss is the following. You're going to miss that the rise of Europe is with the plundering of the Americas. All the silver and gold that came this way was with indigenous blood. Okay? And the Battle of Lepanto in the late 16th century, this is Dussel speaking, a Christian theologian of liberation, telling Tariq Ramadan, there's nothing wrong to be Muslim. If you want to understand the fall of Islam, you need to understand the following. These boats, this naval fleet of the Spaniards that beat up the Ottomans in the Mediterranean, in the Lepanto, the Battle of Lepanto, all these ships were built with indigenous bloods, with the enslavement of indigenous people over there. And all this wealth was plundering, saqueando, con el saqueo de las Américas, with plundering the gold and the silver of the Americas. And then what happened was that Islamic civilization got in a crisis. Why? Because they flooded the market with silver and gold, and that devalued the value of gold and silver that was a central commodity used in Islamic civilization. So it created a huge inflation in Islamic civilization. It weakened Islamic civilization while the Europeans were rising with all the wealth coming from there. And then a few centuries later, you look at it like it without looking at the Atlantic, and then you think, oh, there's something great they're doing, and then the next thing you're going to do is imitate them. Okay, let's try to imitate them. So now let's imitate, because then there's something we're not doing, something missing, looking at your belly button, and it's saying, hey, is the fall of the Islamic civilization has to do fundamentally with a shift in the global power relations, where the conquest of the Americas was a central part of the rise of Europe, you see, and by not looking at that, then you end up fetishizing, enchanted with the rise of Europe and thinking that there's something wrong with you. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's that you need to understand what happened historically. Because what happened historically was this shift in relational forces and the devaluation of the wealth of Islamic civilization through the conquest of the Americas. And that's how Islam went down. It became weakened. The next thing the Europeans did was what? After 300 years of European colonial expansion, by the early 19th century, then they went to conquer Muslim lands. And now they were very strong. Islamic civilization was very weak. And that's when they took that moment to go and conquer and destroy Islamic civilization. They destroyed. What we know today as Wahhabism, for example, Wahhabism is an invention of 200 years ago. And it's a British creation, Wahhabism. Because what they're doing is using the methods of reading of the Christian Protestant fundamentalists of reading the Bible, the methods of the Christian fundamentalists to read the Quran. And the British created this and supported this and influenced this, shaped this Wahhabism because they wanted to topple the Ottomans. And so they mobilized this as a way, and this is Wahhabism. Wahhabism is a recent thing in Islamic civilization. It's nothing. It's not there since long time. It's a modern creation of the British. Without the British, Wahhabism would have been a sectarian group that disappeared over there in the Arabian Peninsula. It just turned so powerful because the British were, funding them and giving them weapons and everything for toppling the Ottomans. But what I want to say to answer your question is that the moment Islamic civilization was destroyed was after you have already the Europeans, because at that moment the Europeans at the beginning were not able to topple the Muslims. The Muslim civilization was very strong, so they went to the Americas, they went to some parts of Africa, some part of Asia. They went to Kerala early on. That was Muslim, but it was an isolated part inside the continent. Anyway, they went around. They started becoming very strong, very powerful, and then they took advantage. Once they were very strong, like 300 years after the European colonial expansion and the plundering of the rest of the world, that's when they went after Islamic civilization started conquering Islamic in the 19th century. It was very late because by that time Islamic civilization was very weak economically relative to Europe. The Europeans were already way ahead because of the plundering of the. And this is the answer Enrique Dussel gave to Tariq Ramadan. And Tariq Ramadan said he stayed quiet like this, and then when he reacted, he was okay. What do you have to say about this? And he said, well, let me tell you something. He said, I never thought about it. I need to think about it. I never heard this. I need to rethink things, he said. That was the only thing he could say, because this guy gave a world historical explanation to what was the rise of Europe and the demise of Muslim civilization in a way that Tariq Ramadan couldn't say anything. He was like, oh, I never thought about this. And what he was basically telling him is, stop looking at your belly button and start looking to the world and what happened, to get the big picture. Okay? Anyway.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just saying because the taxi is coming for 5:15 the first round. Because I figured we would have to be out of here by 5. I gave
But Kasim, we can discuss that.
Yes.
But I'm not ready for this conversation to end.
If
if we have time, if we don't.
Yeah,
it's okay.
he can wait outside for a bit.
I'm
That's
sorry.
fine.
It's a
Yeah,
quick question. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So, oh gosh, flustered. My question was, you were talking about how one way for us to kind of reclaim our power as Muslims is to decolonize our minds and our history and rewrite it and everything. Especially with everything that's going on with Palestine and all of us kind of understanding and seeing firsthand like colonialism happening in front of us. I think my question is how, like, as we continue learning and as we continue decolonizing, I've realized in myself that there's a lot of collective trauma and a lot of generational grief that comes out, especially as we learn about what has happened to our people, like as part of the Ummah, but also like our individual identities as well. So in the process of decolonizing, how do you recommend we kind of deal with that grief?
Okay, we decolonization takes two things, and this is similar to Islam. Is decolonizing from the outer structures of the system, okay, that oppress you. We need to decolonize from that, but we also have to decolonize from the inner structure of the system that we have internalized. For that, it requires spirituality as a form of decolonizing our hearts, our souls. So it's not just, so it's the concept of jihad in the good sense of the term, which is jihad as fighting injustices in the outer world, but also inner jihad, that is decolonizing through spiritual practices our hearts, our grief, our sadness, our depression, all this stuff, So that's decolonizing psychology, decolonizing psychology, but it's through a spiritual path that we're going to arrive there. So it's jihad, in the good sense of the term, that we need to put in practice in both directions, outer, inside, at the same time. If you only fight the outer structure of the system and you don't deal with the inner inside, my God, we're in trouble. You become Stalin. Because Stalin was fighting the outer structures, but then he never deal with the inner structure and then repeat the whole thing again, and did everything he was fighting against.
yeah.
You see? And became a horrible dictator, in the name of socialism and dealing with justice. If you dedicate yourself for inner structure and decolonize your inner structure, but don't deal with injustices of the world, then you become New Age.
Yeah.
So it's in both directions that we need to do the fight at the same time, not one here, one there. It's the two things at the same time.
But we have the other dimension to this is as a South Asian Muslim. The concept
The driver is waiting outside.
The driver is waiting outside, but like every other time.
Well, one last thing, I want to just listen to you. I'm not going to answer it.
Okay. No, so what I was going to say is just
Let me move and talk to you.
Muslims in the South Asian communities, they can't grasp the concept of spirituality in the sense that you may know it and practice it. So there's a bigger challenge for as individuals to overcome and to soften our hearts to be able to do what you just described.
Okay.
There's another internal challenge.
Okay.
Is about, like, for example, I was raised taught that Sufism was haram, for example.
Okay.
And that's a very common misconception
I
that
see.
we're taught.
Where are you coming from?
My
Malaysia?
family Bangladeshi, but born and raised in London.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would call that dimension.
Salam alaikum. Thank you very much.
Hi, walaikum salam. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Are you staying around here for a bit, or do you have to?
I have. Well, why you wanna?
Well, I was gonna say because